Muri yeZimbabwe mufaro wangu kusangana nemi zvakaripo pano paZimu News update pano petinodai kupai first hand update anonga ari kuitika muno munyika yeZimbabwe. So tokukurudzirana kuti kana uri mutsva usabve pano usina kusubscribe, kulike nekushare. According to our news tine mashoko tiri kutambira kuna Comrade Soko vanova varivo vanodipa nhauwa dzina dziri kuitika inside bato reZANU-PF. Zvakafanana mazuva ekubviswa kwaPresident Robert Mugabe paya paya vakauya achitotiudza kuti mudhara hapasisina, mudhara atodini, mudhara vatorwa pasi. Even zvekunzi vachamisa havasi kutonga 2023 asati atombobuda maelection tata kutozviziva zvese kutoti no zvinhu zvakamira zvakadai. So vaMnangagwa vari kuramba vachienderera mberi nekutonga because zana Comrade Soko vanongo varimo inside ZANU-PF vanongo vachiziva zvese zvinhu zvichiitika. So vanouya vachiturira mashoko pano. So nhauwa yakubviswa kwaVice President Constantino Chiwenga iri kuramba ichienderera mberi sezvo zvatiri kuziva kuti ndofunga pane mapictures ari kuseculata. Ndofunga muri kuona kuda tagwirei ainge ari ku precab farm kana kusi ku precab farm kumusha kwa Mnangagwa kuzvishavane kuya kwaiwe kuina chivhayo akarara achizvitonga sort of like ndiye boss ndiye president wainge vakagara but chivhayo akaita zvekurara kudai. So ndokwaenda futi kuda tagwirei tiri kuona mapictures ari kuseculata. Takaona futi tungwarara chinguva chadarika ainge ariko futi ikoko muri yeZimbabwe. So madiscussion aya tiri kunzwa kuti ari kuramba achienderera mberi but Comrade Soko vari kutaura kuti it's a bomba rakateiwa, ibomba chero riri kugadzirwa naPresident Emerson Mnangagwa. Sezvo muri kuziva kuti bomba rakagadzirwa naPresident Robert Mugabe rekubvisa president ibomba ravanga vakagadzira paya zvokuti dai vanga vasina kubvisa Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa pangadai pasitomborina yese yakaitika but kubvisa kwakaita Vice President vaMnangagwa ndo pakabva paputika bomba riwa ndo parakabva radonha. Takaona vaMugabe havana kutomboita mazuva, havana kutomboita about 15 days vainge vadonhedzwa. So ndo mamiriro akaita nhauwa idzi dzetinadzo pano. Tichipinda futi mudzimwe nhau tira kusirai muchinzwa debate ravaNelson riri kutaura pamusoro pavaNelson Chamisa rekuti vaNelson Chamisa vari kuda kugadzira bato risina mastructures. Kana tichireva kuti bato risina mastructures tatichirevei? Bato riya risina kana zviya zvekutoti kwanzi kuna spokesperson weCCC, kuna chichi secretary general wakaita sana Shabangu waya rinenge risina zvinhu zvakafanana neizvozvo because sezvo tiri kuziva kuti vanhu vari kutengwa, vanhu vari kutengwa nyange akachinja bato zvakaita sei mari muri yeZimbabwe because politics dzese dzavanhu vari kudziita vari kutodziitira mari. So mari ma1 akangogadzira bato rine mastructure chete ZANU-PF inongoya nemari rongoparara because takadotarisa mabato ese atanga ese kutanga kune ratsvangere racho rakaparadzwa nepamusaka pemari. Toya kune MDC Alliance yakatanga yakaparadzwa nepamusaka pemari. Toya kune CCC yakaparadzwa futi nepamusaka pemari. So now vari kunzi wagadzira bato risina mastructures tisikazivi kuti richazofamba sei because pana pari kudiwa MPs, councils, machichi nevanhu vakasiyana siyana. So pamweni vari kugadzira movement bato riya rinonga riri kungoita zvemovement chete risina mastructures sekutaura kwavari kuita. So ngatinzwei debate riri pano pamusoro pavaNelson Chamisa muzongotiudza mucomment section kuti zvinenge zvakamira sei.
I understand what he means. I think there really needs to be a complete sit down of saying, okay, yes, we can find some good things that are in the Constitution. We can pull some good things that are out of it. But really, to be honest, who are we as Zimbabweans? Is this really speak to who we are as Zimbabweans? Or are we now just sort of like, as he said, it's shredded? It is, it's shredded. The amount of amendments that have happened have always been to favor those that are currently in power, just to make them more powerful, as we know. And so, yeah, those are just my thoughts as I'm listening to this. I might have some more thoughts later on. But initially, when I heard that, I was like, yeah, 100%, because I think that's exactly what needs to happen. We need a revamp, and it needs to now bring in every single Zimbabwean, not just the elite Zimbabweans, because even when that initial constitution was done, how many Zimbabweans were educated to that point that they could contribute to that? Or was it just the elite Zimbabweans who are still in the ruling power now that made the decisions of what that constitution was going to be? where is the voice of the Zimbabwean individual when there's been referendums to change the constitution? How many people have had the autonomy to be able to vote when we know that elections and any type of voting is often rigged? These are things that I just don't know if we are like really scrutinizing. I'll end there for now.
Ndotaura here inini because naona avapedza saka
No, no. Mira yenyu mofu. Pane vauya imimi musati mauya. Saka chimbomira ndichakuudzai pekuti zvinenge mutaure. Right. Focusing on the shredded and mutilation part of his claim. I know that one, it is a political language that he was using right there. But beyond it being a political language, it is reflective of the real debate that is going on right now. Because I pointed out, Kuti, the constitution is there on paper. It has not been repealed, it's there on paper. But there are things that have happened that have kind of weakened its authority. And even if you look at the 2017, coup, that was not a coup. That right there did something, to the constitution. We've got selective application of rights, and we are witnessing that. We've got amendments that centralize executive power, and we're witnessing that. Appointment of judges, etc. And we've got institutions that are lacking in independence. They're lacking when it comes to the aspect of independence. So the aspect of it being, shredded, I'm quite sure, we all understand that not to necessarily mean that the text has disappeared, nothing is there anymore, or the text is disappearing, nothing is there anymore. But I want to believe even he alluded to that. That is speaking to an aspect of constitutional order. And when we talk about constitutional order, maybe we might not understand what it is that is trying to communicate, but it speaks to the culture of respecting the rules, the limits, and the institutions, and that culture has been eroded. So whether we agree or we do not agree, the claims that he's making, they speak to a wider concern, Dr. Moses. And that concern, Dr. Moses, is the gap between the constitutional promise. Because when they speak about that constitution, they say it's one of the best written constitution. There's a constitutional promise in that document. So the gap between the constitutional promise and the lived reality in terms of some of these things that I've spoken about is so much widened to such an extent that we are even questioning ourselves whether this here really functions, whether this here is still safeguarding our interests, or whether it still exists. So when he then says there's no constitution to defend, Dr. Moses, your understanding of that statement?
Yeah, thank you, Uncle Jed. Thank you, the previous speakers, the listeners, and it's a very interesting discussion. I will start by saying that this is not the first time, Uncle Jed, that Advocate Chamisa has said that there's no constitution to defend. I think he said it some time back, in response to someone on Twitter. So I don't think that this is metaphorical. It is not metaphorical. In any case, if it was metaphorical, then, and he realizes that people are misinterpreting the meaning of that statement, then he has the responsibility to communicate and clarify, which he has not done. But the truth is that this is not metaphorical. It literally means that we have no constitutional order to defend. But I think I will start with an appreciation of the struggle for a new constitution in Zimbabwe. The first constitution that we had, probably the benchmarking one, is the Longest House Constitution. And this Longest House Constitution was amended a number of times, and beginning the late 1980s to early 1990s, we started to see civic organizations such as the National Constitutional Assembly are criticizing the Longest House Constitution, saying we want a new constitution, a people-driven constitution, which culminated in the draft constitution of 2000 and a referendum where that draft constitution was rejected. And then we now had the unity government, and then this 2013 constitution. So you have to appreciate the kind of struggle that went into the search for a people-driven constitution in Zimbabwe. You understand? And I can say without any doubt that yes, this constitution has areas where it needs improvement. That's why, even when it was passed, people like Professor Maduku said, no, this is not, the ideal constitution we wanted. People like Takura Jangaja said, so there are people who questioned it. But the bottom line is that I think it is one of the ensuring achievements of this struggle for a new constitutional order, especially when we look back to the unit government. That is something that stands out as an achievement of the unity government, right? This is how I see it. So I think it's very important. Then there's a difference. I think there's a difference between a constitution and constitutionalism. The constitution is, of course, the text, and constitutionalism is the culture of respect for the text. So I think he's confusing these two things. And as an opinion leader, he should be, he should be careful of what he says, because we definitely have a constitution which has to be defended. It is a constitution, I think previous speakers like Dr. Tadini have highlighted, it's a constitution with an extensive bill of rights, for example, that cannot be willy-nilly amended. It's a constitution which even people like Magaisa talked about. They talked about the kind of struggle they went through to come up with that document. And there's somebody who talked about defending the zones of autonomy, right? In any struggle for democracy, there are incremental gains that you make. You may not be happy with them, but at least you have something to protect it. Then you expand it. That is what I think is this constitution that we are talking about. Then so the issue, what we do not have in Zimbabwe is constitutionalism, respect for the constitution. And it is our responsibility to uproot that and say, let us respect this constitution. So we have a constitution to defend against unconstitutionalism. That is the true position of the situation that we are facing as a nation. So it's kind of disturbing when somebody of the stature of Advocate Nelson Chamisa comes and say there's no constitution to defend. Then another thing, Ango Jed, is the context where this statement is said. Look at opposition figures like Vanabiti, Vakaita meeting paya vachida ku oppose the 2030 agenda. Sape House Peaceful and all that. An institution that is defending the constitution. Recently, we saw Mnangagwa women and other guys say establishing an organization to say we need to defend the constitution. Then a leading opposition figure comes and say there's no opposition to defend. It's a nullity. I mean, what kind of message does that send at a time when we need all hands on the deck? Okay, we need to all hands on the deck as the opposition to say we are facing an existential crisis, especially our constitution. So so the question now for people would be say, who is the beneficiary of the statement that there's no constitution in Zimbabwe? We have no constitution to defend. Because in any case, if you want to fight anything in Zimbabwe, you have to make reference to the constitutional order. You understand? But if you now say there's no constitution, it is a kind of statement that actually, for me, ZANU-PF would be happy to hear such a statement, because then what are you going to use as the basis to resist what they are doing? So for me, it is very worrisome, and I would expect someone like him to have certain people who can conduct research for him and give him an understanding of some of these issues, rather than just talking like that. You don't need to come back like that, and then it's unfortunate, Ango Jet, that we are actually discussing this, and it came from a leading political figure. Maybe as I learned, there's something I wanted to say. Okay, so you can't say there's no constitution to defend. There's someone who talked about contradictions, and then you say again there's an overthrow of the constitutional order. Those things, they don't speak to each other, Ango Jet. The moment you say there's no constitutional order to defend, then I can assure you, Ango Jet, there's no struggle that you can fight. You literally take every ground from under your feet. So you can't oppose the 2030 agenda without making reference to the constitution, for example. So it's wrong. Then my last point is that you can't say let's defend the country, and there's no constitution to defend, let's defend the country. You can't separate the two. The moment you talk about the country, you are actually talking about the constitutional order. It's practically impossible, Ango Jet. So what is a country, Ango Jet? What is a state? For those who studied international relations, according to the Montevideo Convention, a state has 4 criteria. It has a permanent population, right? It has a defined territory. It has a government, and this government is the administrative authority in that country, but it gets its authority from the constitutional order, and it must have the capacity to enter into international relations. So, and it must be recognized by other states. So you can't talk about defending a state or a country and then you say there's no constitution, there's no constitution. I mean, literally, we don't need rocket science to say this, Ango Jet. The starting point to defend any state is actually the constitution itself. Even if you may not be happy with the provisions, even if it needs improvements. So I think you needed to point out, like Dr. Tadin said, the areas that are being mutilated and the areas that needs to be improved. But at least there's something that is worthy of defending. I think I'll end there, but it's very unfortunate that we're having this discussion.
Right. Yeah, I've seen Prince, you know,